The Knight and the Dragon. Once upon a time there lived a knight named Billy, who served his king faithfully and with honor. The knight was a tall and lean man with thick black hair and long beard. He always wore shiny steel armor that sparkled in the sunlight. A helmet with a red feather adorned his head, symbolizing his knighthood. His sword was hanging by his side, sharp and gleaming, always prepared for battle. One day the king ordered Knight Billy to venture into the southern regions of the kingdom and slay a dragon that had been wreaking havoc, pillaging villages and tormenting peasants. The knight was ready to carry out the command, believing it was his duty to protect people of the country. Knight Billy set out on his journey and after several weeks reached the southern borders of the kingdom. There he searched long for the dragon's lair, asking the local peasants for help, but for some reason they were reluctant to assist the noble warrior. Finally, Knight Billy stumbled upon the cave where the dragon lurked. The flying monster was a colossal creature with emerald green scales and broad wings that could create gusts of wind as it flapped them. It had a head adorned with horns, a long neck and sharp teeth. Its eyes glowed a bright yellow in the darkness like two flashlights. The dragon breathed fire and could destroy a castle with a single breath. It was terrifying yet beautiful and majestic at the same time. "Caught you at last!" exclaimed Knight Billy, lifting the visor of his helmet and drawing his sword. "By the king's name, I challenge you to a duel, ugly scarecrow!" "You yourself are the ugly scarecrow!" retorted the dragon, offended but accepting the challenge. They engaged in battle, and it was fierce. Knight Billy realized that his opponent was incredibly strong and dangerous, but he didn't give up, knowing that the lives of many people were at stake. For 3 days the knight and the dragon fought. The dragon tried to knock the warrior down with the sweeps of its giant wings, but Billy stood firm. It breathed streams of flame, but the knight covered himself with a shield that withstood the onslaught, albeit becoming blackened with soot. The knight was swinging his sword, but it was only striking the dragon's scales, which proved tougher than any armor. Eventually, both the dragon and the knight grew fatally weary. "A break?" suggested the dragon, leaning against the wall and breathing heavily. "A break," agreed Knight Billy, sheathing his sword. The adversaries sat by a fire. The dragon produced a pot of meat, skewered chunks on spits, and cooked a delicious barbecue. He offered some to the knight, who didn't refuse the meal. Knight Billy noticed that the dragon didn't seem as evil and dangerous as he had been led to believe. "Why do you ravage our villages?" the knight asked. "Who ravaged them? Me?" The dragon was surprised. "Who told you that? On the contrary, I help the peasants. I plow their fields with my huge claws and help to remove enormous boulders. When crops are threatened by pests, I fly over the fields and spray them with insecticides. It's a special liquid that kills insects but doesn't harm the harvest. To be honest, among other things, I also devour king's tax collectors. But the local peasants are happy about it because it's these royal bloodsuckers who pillage surrounding villages, not me." The knight was astonished by what he heard. "So that's why no one wanted to tell me where you lived?" "I think the king has been excessively greedy with taxes, so the peasants suffered greatly from constant levies. And when I started to exterminate the tax collectors, the king decided to send you to deal with me." The knight jumped up from his seat in incredible anger. It turned out the king has taken advantage of Billy's nobility to deceitfully solve his own problem. "Hey, where are you going?" the dragon asked. "Back to the royal castle," exclaimed Knight Billy. "I'll show this scoundrel how to oppress the common folks and deceive noble knights." "Wait a minute, my impatient friend," the dragon stopped him. "I think you're too impulsive and quick to make decisions. Perhaps it would be better to understand the situation and think first." "What do you mean?" asked the knight. "Well, first you rushed at me and we fought for 3 days. Only then did you ask why I ravaged the surrounding villages. And it turns out things are not as they seem." "But you didn't exactly ask questions either and jumped into the fight," the knight retorted. "And I don't deny that," the dragon agreed, "because I'm also temperamental and inclined to act first and think later. But perhaps we should do the opposite, so let's learn from our mistakes." "So you are saying that before storming into the royal chambers and confronting the ruler, I should talk to him first?" "Exactly," nodded the dragon. "Explain the situation to him. Tell him that taxing excessively is not right, that a more prudent approach to managing the economy is needed. Talk about windfall profits and venture investments." "But where would I get all this knowledge?" the knight wondered. "Well, let him read this book." The dragon handed Knight Billy a textbook titled The Lever of Rich Treasury, Technological Progress and Economic Creativity. Knight Billy thanked the dragon, took the book and rode back to the king to tell him the truth about what had happened. The king was astonished by what he heard and realized his mistake. He apologized to the knight, read the book in one evening and ordered the cessation of tax collection. He also commanded all peasants to cooperate with the dragon and assist him in his good deeds. For himself, the knight understood that in conflict situations, it's always better to think first and talk to the opponent before engaging in battle. And since then, the knight never had to fight again, except for one occasion, but that's a completely different story.